In the previous videos, we created the framework for the application and we integrated camera functionality. Now let's save the information to a database. And we're going to do that as part of our model. We already created the photo memo, which we use in our view model, but now it's time to add some attributes to it. We need the system.data.link assembly added, and then the system.data.link mapping import for that namespace. There's two attributes that we really care about. Table, to indicate that photo memo will be part of a table. In fact, that this class is actually the row of a table. And then each property of the object will be a column. So we can think about this as being the table of photo memos with a column ID, column for name, column for file name, and the rest. For the most part, you can leave the column attributes off of it. They're mostly optional. But because we want the ID to be primary key, we'll set that. We'll set the fact that it's an identity field by saying it's DB generated, and we'll very explicitly set the DB type and the auto sync. And the can be null lets us set if these are properties that can be created, that can be set with data or not. This doesn't matter at the time that we're interacting with it as an object. At the time we create the object, of course, there wouldn't be data in the property. But at the time that we push it to the database, it will make sure that all of these are correct. So a name cannot be false, nor can the ID. However, because it is set as DB generated, we will never need to set that in code. The second part of working with this is to create the data context, also in the system.data.link namespace. You'll notice there's almost nothing that happens here. Effectively, this is just the object we create. We'll pretend that this is when we make a connection to the database. And inside we have a collection. We could just say photo memos as list of photo memo, but instead we're saying it's a table of photo memo. So now if we instantiate the photo memo context, we've effectively connected to the database. And part of creating a data context is in fact giving it the connection string. For simplicity's sake, we've just embedded that directly into the app.xaml.vb. You'll notice that this connection string is nothing but a simple path here. This is using a new URL scheme that was introduced with the 7.1 SDK. This is isostore:/, which just indicates that it's a file in isolated storage, as opposed to a file that's in the assembly or located as an internet resource. So it's isostore:/ appdatabase.sdf. SDF is the format used for a SQL Server compact database. So this database will be stored as a simple file on the device, and we can use it for all of our data needs. So when we initialize the application, I've now added some additional functionality so that we pass the DB connection string to the Memo view model. And this will now, as part of the view model, create the connection to the database. And then I have a method to load the collections from the database. So let's see how this works. We'll go into the photo menu view model. First of all, you'll see where we pass in the connection string, and we use it to create an instance of that photo memo context. Now I haven't actually done any talking to the database yet. It won't do anything until we've actually interacted with the objects. So now every time we add or remove a memo, we have a little bit of extra work to do. When we add a photo memo, we go to our photo memos, and instead of just calling a simple add like we would on a collection, we call insert on submit, and then we immediately submit the changes. Similarly, if we delete it, we call delete on submit, and we submit the changes. When we start up, we call load collections from database. This is where the actual connection to the database goes. MemoDB is the database, photo memos is the table, and by passing it to observable collection, that forces it to be iterated over, which causes the query to be run, and we now have an observable collection of the items in the database. It should be noted, though, that this will not automatically update as new items are added to the database. So that's why we also still have to add them to the all photo memos observable collection in addition to the database. So let's take a look at what that will look like. You'll notice that we've taken out the buttons here to add and remove the memos because we're using the camera, and we'll delete them from history if we want to. So we'll take a snapshot and a second one. We can go to history to see our items. And the thumbnails look a little bit strange here. This is just how the emulator returns photos though, and this is different of course on a real device. And if we click on it, it takes us to the details page, same as before. The magic happens if we exit and re-enter the application. It can now load from the database, and they reload right back again. And that added very little code to interact with the database. In the next video, we'll update the live tile based on statistics about our photos.